All right, that is really a wild score, Klaus. So much imagination, so many different colors and motives and everything else. But the problem that we've got with it is that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't connect in terms of balance, right? Um, there are some places where you're having some phrases start very strong, like especially in the brass, and then they don't really carry through to the instruments that they're trading off to. Do you know what I mean? Or sometimes you'll have a phrase bulked up by very strongly by brass, and then trading off to instruments that are not as strong. And then there's something weird is happening with the mock-up. This was like not even playing back. It wasn't playing back when it exported. It wasn't playing back when I was trying it out live. I don't know what's wrong. So I mean, it's a cool idea. What the note performer mock-up thinks you want to do here is a pretty fun idea too. But that's not what you intended. So I think you just really have to be careful in situations like this. Yeah, da 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 da. Like you're coming in with just mezzo forte strings, right? And then you're coming in right on top of it with forte clarinets and trumpets. So we can barely hear the beginning of it. And bum ba 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 ba. You know what I mean? It's just yeah, and then yeah da 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 dum bum 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 bum. I mean, here the trade-off isn't too bad, but it doesn't have quite the it doesn't the texture doesn't quite follow through, if you know what I mean. So that would be that if that's something that you suspected might be a problem, it really will be a problem. I mean, there's something wonderful about the about the play between the instrumental groups, and I can see that in some places you're trying to balance things out, brass forte against fortissimo violins and so on. But you should also have your winds fortissimo, right? Like that, it's the brass that should be held back, not everybody above the strings or above the percussion. So yeah, and I mean, and some of these things in the harp are not going to really come through. I mean, this will sort of come through, kind of. I'm not sure what you're indicating here. Mezzo forte. Do you mean mezzo forte up here and then forte down there? Because I don't understand this. And then here non arpeggiando. So non arpeggiando is almost certain. That's like that. That is the way that you ensure that your harp won't be hurt. Right? Okay. So in a big loud texture, everybody's playing fortissimo. You have brass. You have timpani. You have sforzando strings and so on. Non arpeggiando from the harp is what makes the harp disappear, right? It's arpeggiando, the delayed attack of most of the strings, the sort of rippling, the kind of rippling roll of a big chord that will make the harp stand out, right? But non arpeggiando is like it just becomes kind of like a single attack, and that has no chance against the weight of all the other parts here. The glissandos are nice. That get to be a bit much, yeah, just a sort of a thing of proportions, right? Are the proportions of the conception here, are they going to add up to something coherent, right, or cohesive? There's also, I'm not sure if this is copy paste error or something, but you don't have to say secco over and over again. All you have to do is just say it once, right? And then when you're done with things being secco, like let's say here, you could say norm and normale, right? Or ordinario. So yeah, so you don't have to repeat secco. The player will get it. Even just marking an eighth note or a 16th note will be enough to tell them. Okay, so it I don't know, a score that is this complex, it really kind of puts a lot of pressure on me as an orchestration coach, and like to give you the same level of feedback that I would give covering the same issues and really discussing them in the same detail as everybody else would take 3 times as long. You know what I mean? Because you've got so many different changes and differences of approach, and you're just tossing you know one approach to another approach to another approach, and yeah, I mean it's I cannot. I mean, this is the kind of score where we would really have to pick apart every single bar or every phrase and go forward in a formal orchestration lesson. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try right now, but just to let you know that if I seem to not be covering things in the same detail, it's just because I cannot. It's like a can of worms. I can't put my hands on all the details at once. There's just too much going on. Okay, and there was another score recently that was kind of approaching this level of complexity. So I'll do what I can. Okay, but you have to cut me some slack. All right. Okay. So starting from the beginning, some of the concerns in the evaluation criteria don't really apply. You are expanding on the pitch weight from the piano score, like across the board, across the whole scope of the orchestra, in fact, and that's fine. The concern about thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive, that is out the window because you don't do that at all. You don't repeat anything, really. So that's fine. Okay. So that just sort of leaves us like looking at those groups, those 2 different groups, the first 4 bars, the second 4 bars, and just kind of qualitatively analyzing them, right? You're starting off here, you're backing off on your percussion, although you have very heavy timpani stroke there. And you're backing off on your brass, that's fine. As I said before, your winds do not have to be forte to the fortissimo of the strings. They could be the same dynamic level. Now, I looked at the mixer in for your mock-up, and I noticed that you have the levels kind of like all over the place. You have very, very loud brass, and then you backed off on your percussion, and you backed way off on your harp. I mean, and then the strings are way up, but the winds are back. So I think that like a better approach might be, since note performer and to a degree the Sibelius native sounds and so on, since they are already kind of balanced to what's realistic in the orchestra, is to let them do the work. And if you're going to use them as a guide, try to orchestrate respecting the levels of how things balance, rather than kind of enforcing a specific mix, because then your score becomes more like cinematic music. And there is a very cinematic touch to this, a cinematic approach, where it really does sound like movie music in a lot of places, and that's great. It's just like what is possible on stage, and there's a lot of stuff in the score that, I mean, it doesn't balance already with the way that you've got your level set in the mixer. So so I would say just try not to tweak that so very much. Try to, the levels the way that they usually are probably all right. So just like judging from that in terms of balancing your score, then I think it will steer you right. Like, for instance, having your string levels way up like that, and then having your wind levels kind of down. Like, we could barely hear the winds right in here, and that's a shame, because like I really love the idea of the trills and so on. So this could be easily marked fortissimo all the way through, and then you get more support in the low end from your winds, from your lower winds. Okay, so yeah, I mean it all pretty much works. and you sort of have this call and response. Yeah. And then, all right, so then like just judging that second group where the melody is stated. So are you sure that you wanted to leave off, that you wanted to go byum 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 dun 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 dun? So like because this trill right here doesn't quite fulfill the B. So you see, like, so here you got B B B B B B B, but like the whole sense of a downbeat here is not very strong, because like the instruments that take the part of like a an articulated forceful B note are absent, right? So you've got this cool idea, ba 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 ba. And I think leaving it out and just going to a trill here, the problem is the trill, like you would need to have an accent on the trill or something like that. There needs to be something up here that carries it through, unless you really want that sense of that gap, right? You just really want that, just something to happen there that, ba-dum, 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 ba-ba-ba-bum, right? I think that's cool. I think this is cool right in here. I mean, there's so many neat touches to this. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's badly orchestrated, or that that your sense of just sort of having this beautiful melange of colors is wrong. It isn't wrong at all, right? But just the question is how to get things to carry through. There's like a lot of things that don't carry through. So like, for instance, here you go, bum bum bum, and then like this is accentuating what happened before, this dropout, by just like all of a sudden no brass, right? And it's kind of strange because here, dun 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 dun, like we have a downbeat here, but we don't have a downbeat here, right? And then, I mean, it's still strong, but it's just like we suddenly have the oomph taken out in here. So I'm just wondering if like this could be assisted by lower brass or lower winds more. That there could be something carrying through a bit more. All right, so like I said, I mean, this is just me racing through this and trying to give you what feedback I can, without this turning into a 3 hour orchestration lesson instead of 45 minutes of coaching. All right, so now jump back to the other sections. We have the criteria of melodic development soaring quite high, the accompaniment figures covering a wide range. So it's kind of interesting, like in terms of the accompaniment figures, you kind of have just the barest little minimum of that kind of wonderful leaping kind of scoring in the left hand of the piano, right? There's just a little touch here and there, and that would be something that I would say, if you're going to revisit this and try to clean it up a little bit, I would say just try to make that more prominent, right? Because you've got so many notes playing the melody, right? And you've got so much harmony and emphasis of the downbeat, right? But in terms of that there's really, like, we have very little here, right? And just a touch here and there. And then comparing that to the other part, that it's we just have a touch here and there, right? And those are important parts, right? So that possibly should be something to rethink. All right, now as to the treatment of the melody, it's kind of fun the way that you just play around with the registers of things. But as I said before, what is balancing? Mezzo forte in our strings here, piano in other parts, piano and mezzo forte, and suddenly this comes in loudly, right? So, if you really want that almost cubistic approach where it just really is a big chunk that is just suddenly invading the music, then that's what you're gonna get, right? So I mean, and do you really want dun 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 dun? Do you really want to articulate this note, right? Or just tie it and then have the other players come in on one and, right? Anyway, just some things. And I like, I like the way that you're kind of stacking things on top of each other. Here you're doing contrary motion, but why does it have no support in other parts, right? I mean, I like the idea of the harmony right in here. That's very, very cool. Yeah, but yeah, just you need more support right here. And then the trading off here, that's very cool. But why can't the strings be involved supporting the flutes up here? Right? I mean, I understand you're trying to get a differentiated color. Yeah, but I'm just not sure that the strength of the flutes is adequate. Okay, but I mean, you are solving some of those problems of melodic development soaring quite high. Okay, and then continuing on, once again, starting lower. Bum, 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 ba, 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 da, 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 da. See, I'm not sure that this is strong enough, the trade off here. Because, like, you just marked fortissimo here, right? So you have fortissimo and forte brass. Then you get to here, and then you trade off to these other instruments. And this, by the way, these should be, if you really want to trade off, it has to be the same time value, right? So eighth notes in all parts on that downbeat. But that isn't really the problem. The problem is that this is so strong, this is so powerful, and you can even hear it in the mock-up. What comes after just sounds like a kind of a pale echo. And I mean, it's not necessarily a pale echo in the way where you kind of have this very cool effect, almost like I was saying cubistic before, where you have like a bright color and a cool color following each other on a painting or something. Here we sort of have the problem that the force of the previous gesture is so powerful that what comes after is just kind of the ear does not even quite pick it up as noticeable right away until it's like, oh right, yeah, this is keeping going, right? So there's a kind of a lack of clarity in the trade-off. So I would say, like, maybe bring the volume down. You could have a trade-off of the color, but just really try to control the strength when you're going from very loud brass to a softer follow through, right? And then yeah, yeah. So here you've got a little support on that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you need. I don't think you can just throw in contrary motion like this into one part, into the strings, and not have any support above. So in this case, maybe you could have oboe parts that intersect, right, that go opposite directions. All right. So now getting to the relentless phrase. Okay, so there's absolutely zero concern about the upper middle register being relentless here. You are obviously providing textural contrast all over the place. About the only thing that I would say is relentless here is you have just spent 16 minutes, 16 bars showing how brilliant you are at coming up with just widely shifting different approaches, right? So what if you just let up a little bit and tried to sort of stay on track with maybe one solid approach or approaches that really followed one another with a sense of inevitability. See that's one of the inevitability is one of those features of orchestration, that a lot of orchestrators have, and like orchestrating something so that makes so much sense, one part following the other one, making so much sense to the listener. That is a real gift. However, it can get to be a bit of a crutch, right? You can it's just like with if everything always sounds inevitable, then you're kind of taking away the element of surprise, right? So so it's lovely that you have so much surprise and innovation and so on coming before, but like, what if that is becoming a relentless kind of a feature to the music, and you need to have just kind of a more straightforward kind of an approach, right? So it's just a thought. Now, having said that, you really are making the approach a little bit more homogeneous here, which is good, I think. But it still really has there's still so much interplay involved, and the sense of breathlessness is just really is really a feature here. All right, so I've already commented on the non-arpeggiando here. So yeah, yum bum bum da 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 dun da 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 dun da 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 dun. So here we're getting into maintaining a driving staccato, and I think that like all of the shifting registers and everything else right in here is pulling the rug out from under the drive, the sense of being driven towards something, right? So if it just continues to trade around and go back and forth between different voices and everything else, we're really not getting the sense that we're being pushed into the next phrase, right? Just like somebody has got their hands on the shoulders of this motive and it's just shoving it towards, it's giving it the bum's rush, right? I working in nightclubs in my 20s and late teens, just really seeing very capable bouncers shoving people out the door. And there's something about that being shoved out the door that makes the people not want to come back and continue to cause trouble, right? It's a psychological thing. So I think we have to use the psychology here to be more direct in how we are forcing the next phrase into the music, right? So, I mean, the overall structure is pretty good, the way that things are accompanied and so on. And, this harp would work great if everybody was very soft, but it the way that it's scored now, you would need big, rolling, rippling chords at fortissimo, and everybody would have to back off to around mezzo forte for the harp to have any chance at all, and it would still not be a very big sound. So, the structure is okay. It's just all the trading off of the melody is becoming problematic, right? Just a little trading off here and there, but like so much trading off is keeping like it from being a sort of a very driving, pushing kind of, it's you're taking away its ability to be emphatic. And also with things like this, like crescendo to forte, and then all of a sudden you're mezzo forte, right? And then like the kind of inconsistent dynamics right in here. I don't know what is meant coming up. Is the music very excited because it's going to A, Phrygian, right? Or are we just kind of continuing to pile on the innovation, and is that the message, right? Is the message the orchestration, or is it the musical meaning, right? So you have to make that decision when you have this level of innovation in your score. So that takes us to section B, and this is an area where the kind of level of sort of shifting kind of shifting priorities, shifting timbres works actually really well, because it sort of reflects our criteria. Contrast of color, breadth of texture, and middle register scoring is like a concern, so you definitely deliver that. Maintaining differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices. So that is the, like, while you do have the contrast of color and texture, the keeping things balanced so that we can really hear the different functions is the key thing I think I can help you with here, right? So, so starting off with like what is strong about it, right? We've got we have the concern about the high interjecting notes. There's high E's and chords based around E. Keeping them proportioned, and like sometimes, like for instance, here you're leaving out that high E, right? Here you are interpreting it, you're kind of as this sort of trill and the kind of leap up to there and everything else, and then yeah, I mean you're playing around with those high E's and so on, and working them into the texture really really well. So and I really love this, like this kind of sweep up to here and the trill and so on. So it doesn't really exactly portray what Falla is meaning there. Like you are injecting a lot of your own meaning into there, right? So that's also the trade-off of putting so much innovation and so much inventiveness into a score, is that it really becomes more about your ingenuity, right? And that's fine, as an exercise in in orchestration, and then having me give you feedback as in an evaluation. Just be aware of the cost, right? Of the so yeah. So here it just says percussion. I'm just going to flip back really quickly. Percussion. Yeah, so I'm not sure what this is. So maybe snare drum? Okay. Yeah, it looks like snare drum. Okay. So let's talk about the differentiated roles. Okay, so we've got the right? About my only concern here is that, like, once again, is follow through. So like the instruments that are going to go yeah dun 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 dun, don't you've got this bum 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 bum, or bum 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 bum. So the violins are going to be much weaker than the oboes and English horn, right? So if there was some way for the oboe and English horn to grow out of the second violin part, then rather than being just so abrupt, right? What if they started at pianissimo, were playing the same A's, and then pushed into the part, and the second violin's pulled out of it, right? And there's a bunch of different ways of making the handoff feel more organic. Now, we have a little bit of a problem in here, in that Falla really is intending right. He really wants the in the piano score, he wants the line that A, and then continuing on. That is one musical idea, right? So I think that if you really want this to feel like a big connected swoop, just a nice beautiful arc, then really it, like the bassoons and bass clarinet could be playing these thirds, and it could be the clarinets playing an octave higher to connect this forward to your flutes and oboes. It's just having the continuity of line is what's so important. And then continuing on, and here you're kind of borrowing that bum bum bum, like starting the phrasing on the second beat from before, and that's cool. And then I feel like this is a little bit of a weak handoff. You've got this e, and then ba da 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 dun. It just doesn't, it's like in a different register, and it just doesn't feel like it follows through to me, right? But that's just my opinion, right? It might sound fine to you. Maybe the strength, like if this were actually just a single horn line, right? It would be a better trade-off from the trumpet, right? So that's just in terms of the strength, right? It's I mean it's cool in terms of contrast, but is it cool in terms of continuity, right? Now here, like, unless everybody drops down to pianissimo or piano, this harp part is not audible. And it's kind of strange that you stop here with the right hand, right? I don't understand that. Why the harp doesn't continue on with both hands. because easily do so, and it will really kind of the lower a harp part is, the harder it is to hear, right? So just really everything would have to be so quiet right in here, and the more pizzicato that's involved here, the more that erases what the harp is doing. The harp cannot compete with pizzicato unless the parts are just really contrasted dynamically. Like if you have pizzicato way in the background and harp way in the foreground. There's a slight this may be a mistake. This should be an A, right here instead of a G, right? We have A in the line. All right. All right, and that takes us to the triplets. Ba-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-bum. Yeah. So so this is cruising along really, really well, right? But I think this needs to be fattened a little bit because as soon as you bring in the horn, we can't hear the fulfillment of the arc, right? And then da da dum. And it's kind of cool, like this little da da dum da da dum. That's very nice. The trading off. It's very nice. I would say A2 trumpets is way too much because this is a like if you put A2 trumpets on this little response, right? You've got the call and the response. So the response becomes the main element, right? Because it's so loud. You have forte and everybody else is playing, mezzo forte here and then, forte in strings and winds. So they just, it's da 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 da. You know what I mean? It really is shouting out from the. So I would say just one player at mezzo forte. Yeah. And so, all right. So I feel like the melody really has to be more. It just has to be. It has to be drawn a little bit better, right? So you're having the strings come in here and kind of complete that arc. Ba, ba, da, da, dum. But so like, are you happy just to have a single horn like holding that one note be the melody, right? Be that E that needs to be so strong and be, and have more character to it. So I think the function of the melody as you've got it scored here, I mean, it's intriguing the way that you have made some compromises and some adjustments and everything else to it. But I think it's just kind of unclear of like, what the actual function of the melody is not as clear. Yeah, so I mean, and this is all cool in here, these triplets and everything, da 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 da. But I mean, da 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 da. I mean, they don't connect to the apex of of the phrase, right here. In fact, you're going diminuendo here, right? And these triplets are making it hard to hear where the curve sort of fulfills its like its yearnings towards that, right? So that's one problem, and then the other problem too is like the there's a reason why Falla has the triplets under the melody, right? Just like right under, right next to them, and it's kind of difficult. He wants that middle register melody, bum 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 bum. He just really wants that right there in the middle of the piano. But he also wants the triplets right where the rest of his hand can reach them, right? And so that puts them very close together. Now you've separated them out and you put them on top, right? So that's all the more reason why the melody has to be very prominent and clear in order to get the so that we can really hear where they are. And so like for instance here, like we're not really hearing, like we've got a bit of E here, but there's no I mean, it just doesn't quite follow through to a consistent melody all the way through, right? And then the sort of leaping bass line is also a bit suppressed, right? the consistency of it, and so we don't have that kind of sense of dance, right? It's not as dancey as it could be. So don't get me wrong, the orchestration here is just amazing, but like in terms of carrying through the idea of the music, right? That's what I'm being picky about right in here, and hopefully helpful, not too critical, right? Yeah, it's not my job to tell you right, wrong, good, bad, or anything like that. It's just like how is this how are you interpreting the ideas in the score, right? But there's some cool. I like the way that you wrap things up here. That's really really neat. And that takes us to right here. Now, I feel that like you'll hear a little bit of harp at the beginning, right? Just make sure everybody has got like piano or pianissimo, and that the harp is scored like mezzo forte crescendo, right? And then you will have a chance. However, there's one little problem here, and that is that horn absorbs the sound of the harp. So you really have to have a huge differentiation in the sound of the horn and the harp. It's one of those problems. Like with my own harp concerto, I decided that I was going to have horns and tuba or horns and euphonium as the brass for the concerto. But I was also just very keenly aware that I would have to keep them in the back while the harp was playing. So just the same problem here. You just can't mark piano here with piano or pianissimo horns. Everybody, like, you have to be loud, right? The player is going to have to play out here. The other concern, I like the way that you're holding down the harmony and then having the harp play over it, rather than starting each note and then having the start of each note continue on as a sustained note in other parts, right? So I think that's very cool. That's very clever. That works for me. All right. Now this is very, very entertaining. Very, very cool. And once again, the balance here really can be forte everybody. Everybody can be playing forte if you want to. Or, I see what you're doing. Like everybody mezzo forte, and the violins everybody mezzo forte and the violins are forte. So I would say, if you're going to take this approach, the flutes can be forte as well, because there will be a tendency for this note in the middle to be absorbed by what's going on around it. And you can hear that in the mock-up, right? It just really doesn't. So if the point of this was to have that middle voice sort of be, adding radiance to the double octave of the violins, without really being an element of its own, then I understand, right? But you can still mark it forte. Now, if you really wanted the triple octave in here and with the middle voice equally participating, then you should score it for oboe. But there's this beautiful sweetness to double octaves without anything in the middle, right? So that's something else you could possibly think about. Because you can really, you can hear the overtones of the lower part sitting in the middle, and then the overtone, the fourth harmonic is sitting on the root of the on the fundamental of the note above. It just has a wonderful sound to it. Okay, so we're kind of running into a slight problem here. And that is timing. How easy is it for somebody to go pluck, 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 to like, and I would say for this to really work, it would have to be a little bit slower, right? 92 is what you write, like 80 maybe, right? It might have to be a little slower in order for this, because it's really easy to come in right on the downbeat, bum bum bum, but what if the conductor decides it's a little too slow and he wants to go faster, right? So So that is one of the problems, if you recall, in the possible pitfalls in the announcement video when I talked about that. You know, like how long can you push that, right? So that's something that I avoided and kind of warn against. But you know, if you slow things down a teeny bit, I think it's a little more natural, right? Yeah. So so here you've got way more regularity in your scoring. Okay, and I think it works really, really well. I like the trade-off here in the melody. This, you know, this all feels really good to me, and it's kind of good to have some relief after so much, you know, so many shifts of mood and contrasts of scoring, just one right after the other for pages and pages before, you know. For now, we've got this like kind of more direct, focused scoring approach, and I think that that really helps the music. Um, yeah, and then we get to hear. Yeah, and I like the trade-offs here. Actually, the oboe and English horn and octaves, solo flute, and solo oboe. That's all very cool, and this sort of very busy, bustling accompaniment from below. I would just say try to control this a little bit, right? You know, what's the dynamic here in these supporting parts, like yeah, mezzo forte. So yeah, just try to. I would say try maybe watch out about how high you're pushing it. And then I think things here start to fall apart a little bit. You were maybe you ran out of time, or that was as far as you wanted to take things, and so on. So yeah, so I won't comment too much here, except I really like the trade-off English horn to flute and bassoon in octaves and so on. The first violin here doubling with the English horn. It's just some very cool ideas right in here. So you know, my summation of this, you know, once again is Klaus. You are a really gifted orchestrator. You know, it's there are very few things about this score that don't work, right? Like where I would say, oh, just you know, this is out of balance. That is, you know, I did comment on that as we went through the main issues, right? And this is something that every professional orchestrator, every experienced orchestrator will eventually run into, right? So it's really important for you to know, okay? The really, really important things about a transcription like this are proportions and the meaning of the score, right? So like you can transcribe the notes of the score and you can improve on the notes of the score and you can change them every which way, but is the meaning still intact, right? Or is the meaning elevated, right? What can we do to make the meaning of the score more and more powerful? Whether that is through very, very simple blunt scoring, as we've seen in some of these things, you know, in fact, kind of genius blunt scoring, or whether it's through a very intricate treatment of it, right? That still keeps the meaning of the score very, very present. And then the other issue is, you know, as I was saying just a minute ago, the proportions, right? So it's kind of like a meal, right? Like it's the difference between Korean barbecue, right, and a 7-course meal, right? So with Korean barbecue, you have you know, about 30 little dishes in front of you, and they each have something, you know, some beautiful little wonderful garnish. You can just eat the garnish if you want to, or you can put the garnish on the barbecued meat. You can have different combinations of different flavors and so on and so forth, right? So it's up to it's kind of up to the diner to decide what those proportions are, and they're always going to sort of change according to their taste and their whim and everything else. But in the case of a piece of performed music, at least so far, the listener doesn't have that option of changing things around. So you have to serve up something that is more calculated. So if you're going to have the Korean barbecue approach with your music, with just lots of little things coming at the listener, one thing after another. You still have to very carefully proportion those elements so that they, the whole of the elements represent something that is just like, artistically very cohesive, very coherent all the way through, and that in turn just goes back to the meaning of the music, right? Is the meaning of the music coming through really, really clearly here, right? So, so that would be my advice to you. I feel like I'm catching you at a really, really good place here, right? And so that like that advice could really move you forward professionally as an orchestrator, right? So please think about that very carefully, okay? And having said that, I know I've been very, very not critical is not the right word. I've been very exacting about this score in talking about what I felt worked and didn't work, and that is just my opinion. That is not it is not an artistic critique, right? It's not me being a reviewer giving your score a review or giving it a grade, and it is also not me making any kind of qualitative analysis of you as an artist, right? It is more just talking about how I see your score in terms of getting it ready for the stands and making sure that the listeners can perceive all the really important elements, and also making sure that your work as an orchestrator is at its strongest, right? So that like the things that you're trying to say, even fragmenting the meaning of the work, if that is an intentional thing, even that fragmentation is clearer, right? So please think about all those things. I feel like things suddenly got serious here, but you were handing me something that should be taken seriously. That was the whole point of this, I think. And you've entered these challenges before, and your work has gotten better and has grown and is just really shining at this point, right? So that sort of makes me feel all the more responsible to really make sure that the next steps that you take are going to be as strong as possible. Okay? So sorry about getting so serious here at the end. I really do intend this to be a big feast, of all of these different entries and just really us all getting a lot of joy out of it. But I'm just seeing the serious effort in here, and I really want to make sure that that meaning is clear, right? So thank you for that. Thank you for the huge work that you put into this, Klaus. Just what a great score, what a huge effort, and thanks so much for the support on Patreon. You have been somebody who helped me keep the channel going and have been really supportive and had great comments for me and just really been a part of everything for quite a while, and that's hugely appreciated. And if this is a great time for me, like in these orchestration challenges to sing about the unsung heroes, right? So the people who are really making sure that there are thousands and thousands of people out there who get the resources that they need to move their careers forward a little bit. And just about every week I will see somebody on Facebook like announcing that they got a job, somebody who's been a member of the community announcing that they got a great teaching job, especially around this time of year, or they got a gig writing game music, or they're about to do a project, and that just makes me feel so happy, right? So thanks to everybody. I hope that is all on the cards for everybody who's really taking their stuff seriously and feels ready for it. All right. So thanks to you, thanks to all the viewers and participants, and I will be back with more evaluations very soon.